I'm picking up at page 29 of Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices. Satan's devices to draw the soul to sin. Now, the second thing that I'm to show you is his several devices, and herein I shall first show you the several devices that he hath to draw the soul to sin. I shall instance in these 12, which may bespeak our most serious condition. Device 1, to present the bait and hide the hook. To present the golden cup and hide the poison. To present the sweet, the pleasure, and the profit that may flow in upon the soul by yielding to sin, and by hiding from the soul the wrath and misery that will certainly follow the committing of sin. By this device he took our first parents. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3, 4-5. Your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods. Here's the bait, the sweet, the pleasure, the profit. Oh, but he hides the hook, the shame, the wrath, and the loss that would certainly follow. There is an opening of the eyes of the mind to contemplation and joy, and there is an opening of the eyes of the body to shame and confusion. He promiseth them the former, but intends the latter, and so cheats them, giving them an apple in exchange for paradise. So he deals by thousands nowadays. Satan with ease puts fallacies upon us by his golden baits, and then he leads us and leaves us in a fool's paradise. He promises the soul honor, pleasure, profit, but pays the soul with the greatest contempt, shame, and loss that can be. By a golden bait he labored to catch Christ, Matthew 4. He shows him the beauty and the bravery of a bewitching world, which doubtless would have taken many a carnal heart, but here the devil's fire fell upon wet tinder, and therefore took not. I love his graphic illustrations. These tempting objects did not at all win upon his affections, nor dazzle his eyes, though many have eternally died of the wound of the eye and fallen forever by this vile strumpet of the world, who by laying forth her two fair breasts of profit and pleasure hath wounded their souls and cast them down into utter perdition. She hath by the glistening of her pomp and preferment slain millions as the serpent skytail, which, when she cannot overtake the fleeing passengers, doth with her beautiful colors astonish and amaze them, so that they have no power to pass away till she have stung them to death. Adversity hath slain her 1,000, but prosperity her 10,000. Remedy. First, keep at the greatest distance from sin, and from playing with the golden bait that Satan holds forth to catch you. For this you have, Romans 12:9. Abhor that which is evil, cling to that which is good. When we meet with anything extremely evil and contrary to us, nature abhors it and retires as far as it can from it. The Greek word that is there rendered abhor is very significant. It signifies to hate it as hell itself, to hate it with horror. Anselm used to say that if he should see the shame of sin on the one hand and the pains of hell on the other, and must of necessity choose one, he would rather be thrust into hell without sin than go into heaven with sin. So great was his hatred and detestation of sin. It is our wisest and our safest course to stand at the farthest distance from sin, not to go near the house of the harlot, but to fly from all appearance of evil. Proverbs 5:8, 1 Thessalonians 5:22. The best course to prevent falling into the pit is to keep at the greatest distance. He that will be so bold as to attempt to dance upon the brink of the pit may find by woeful experience that it is a righteous thing with God that he should fall into the pit. Joseph keeps at a distance from sin and from playing with Satan's golden baits and stands. David draws near and plays with the bait and falls and swallows bait and hook with a witness. David comes near the snare and it is taken in it to the breaking of his bones, the wounding of his conscience, and the loss of his God. Sin is a plague, yea, the greatest and most infectious plague in the world, and yet, how few are there that tremble at it, that keep at a distance from it. 1 Corinthians 5:6, know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? As soon as one sin had seized upon Adam's heart, all sin entered into his soul and overspread it. How hath Adam's one sin spread over all mankind? Romans 5:12, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. And how doth the father's sin infect the child? The husbands infect the wife, and the masters the servant. The sin that is in one man's heart is able to infect a whole world. It is of such a spreading and infectious nature. The story of the Italian who first made his enemy deny God and then stabbed him, and so at once murdered both body and soul, declares the perfect malignity of sin. And oh, that what hath been spoken upon his head may prevail with you to stand at a distance from sin. Remedy number 2, to consider that sin is but a bittersweet, that seeming sweet that is in sin will quickly vanish, and lasting shame, sorrow, horror, and terror will come in the room thereof. Though wickedness be sweet in his mouth, though he hide it under his tongue, though he spare it and forsake it not, but keep it still within his mouth, yet his meat in his bowels is turned. It is the gall of asps within him. Job 20, verse 12. Forbidden profits and pleasures are more pleasing to vain men who count madness mirth. Many long to be meddling with the murdering morsels of sin, which nourish not, but rend and consume the belly, the soul that receives them. Many eat that on earth that they digest in hell. Sin's murdering morsels will deceive those that devour them. Adam's apple was a bitter sweet. Esau's mess was a bitter sweet. The Israelites' quails, a bitter sweet. Jonathan's honey, a bitter sweet. Adonijah's dainties, a bitter sweet. After the meal is ended, then comes the reckoning. Men must not think to dance and dine with the devil and then to sup with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, to feed upon the poison of asps, and yet the viper's tongue should not slay them. When the asp stings a man, it doth first tickle him, so as it makes him laugh, till the poison by little and little gets to the heart, and then it pains him more than ever it delighted him. So doth sin. It may please a little at first, but it will pain the soul with a witness at last. Yea, if there were the least real delight in sin, there could be no perfect hell, where men shall most perfectly be tormented with their sin. Remedy 3, solemnly to consider that sin will usher in the greatest and the saddest losses that can be upon our souls. It will usher in the loss of that divine favor that is better than life, and the loss of that joy that is unspeakable and full of glory, and the loss of that peace that passeth understanding, and the loss of those divine influences by which the soul hath been refreshed, quickened, raised, strengthened, and gladdened, and the losses of many outward desirable mercies which otherwise the soul might have enjoyed. It was a sound and savory reply of an English captain at the loss of Calais, when a proud Frenchman scornfully demanded, "When will you fetch Calais again?" replied, "When your sins shall weigh down ours." Ah, England, my constant prayer for thee is that thou mayest not sin away thy mercies into thy hands that cannot call mercy mercy, and that would joy in nothing more than to see thy sorrow and misery, and to see that hand to make thee naked, that hath clothed thee with much mercy and glory. Remedy 4, seriously to consider that sin is of a very deceitful and bewitching nature. Sin is from the greatest deceiver. It is a child of his own begetting. It is the ground of all the deceit in the world. And it is its own nature exceeding deceitful. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Hebrews 3:13. It will kiss the soul and pretend fair to the soul, and yet betray the soul forever. It will with Delilah smile upon us, that it may betray us into the hands of the devil, as she did Samson into the hands of the Philistines. Sin gives Satan a power over us and an advantage to accuse us and to lay claim to us as those that wear his badge. It is of a very bewitching nature. It bewitches the soul where it is upon the throne, that the soul cannot leave it, though it perish eternally by it. Sin so bewitches the soul that it makes the soul call evil good and good evil, bitter sweet and sweet bitter, light darkness and darkness light. And a soul thus bewitched with sin will stand it out to the death. At the sword's point with God, let God strike and wound and cut to the very bone. Yet the bewitched soul cares not, fears not, but will still hold on in course of wickedness, as you may see in Pharaoh, Balaam, and Judas. Tell the bewitched soul that sin is a viper that will certainly kill when it is not killed, that sin often kills secretly, insensibly, eternally, yet the bewitched soul cannot and will not cease from sin. When the physicians told Theodamus that except he did abstain from drunkenness and uncleanness, he would lose his eyes, his heart was so bewitched to his sins that he answered, "Then farewell, sweet light." He had rather lose his eyes than leave his sin. So a man bewitched with his sin had rather lose God, Christ, heaven, and his own soul than part with his sin. Boy, he makes it plain here. Oh, therefore, forever take heed of playing with or nibbling at Satan's golden baits. Device number 2. By painting sin with virtue's colors, Satan knows that if he should present sin in its own nature and dress, the soul would rather fly from it than yield to it. And therefore he presents it unto us not in its own proper colors, but painted and gilded over with the name and show of virtue, that we may the more easily be overcome by it and take the more pleasure in committing of it. Pride he presents to the soul under the name and notion of neatness and cleanness and covetousness, which the apostle condemns for idolatry, to be but good husbandry, and drunkenness to be good fellowship, and riotousness under the name and notion of liberality, and wantonness as a trick of youth. Remedy 1. Consider that sin is never a whit the less filthy, vile, and abominable by its being colored and painted with virtue's colors. A poisonous pill is never a whit the less poisonous because it is gilded over with gold, nor a wolf is never a whit the less a wolf because he hath put on a sheep's skin, nor the devil is never a whit the less a devil because he appears sometimes like an angel of light. So neither is sin any whit the less filthy and abominable by its being painted over with virtue's colors. Remedy 2. That the more sin is painted forth under the color of virtue, the more dangerous it is to the souls of men. This we see evident in these days. He's writing in the 17th century. By those very many souls that are turned out of the way that is holy, and in which their souls have had sweet and glorious communion with God into ways of highest vanity and folly, by Satan's neat coloring over of sin and painting forth vice under the name and color of virtue. This is so notoriously known that I need but name it. The most dangerous vermin is too often to be found under the fairest and sweetest flowers. The fairest glove is often drawn upon the foulest hand, and the richest robes are often put upon the filthiest bodies, so the fairest and sweetest names upon the greatest and the most horrible vices and errors that be in the world. Ah, that we had not too many sad proofs of this amongst us. Remedy 3. To look on sin with that eye with which within a few hours we shall see it. Ah, souls, when you shall lie upon a dying bed and stand before a judgment seat, sin shall be unmasked, and its dress and robes shall then be taken off, and then it shall appear more vile, filthy, and terrible than hell itself. Then that which formerly appeared most sweet will appear most bitter, and that which appeared most beautiful will appear most ugly, and that which appeared most delightful will then appear most dreadful to the soul. Ah, the shame, the pain, the gall, the bitterness, the horror, the hell that the sight of sin, when its dress is taken off, will raise in poor souls. Sin will surely prove evil and bitter to the soul when its robes are taken off. A man may have the stone who feels no fit of it. Conscience will work at last, though for the present one may feel no fit of accusation. Laban showed himself at parting. Sin will be bitterness in the latter end, when it shall appear to the soul in its own filthy nature. The devil deals with men as the panther doth with beasts. He hides his deformed head till his sweet scent hath drawn them into his danger. Till we have sinned, Satan is a parasite. When we have sinned, he is a tyrant. O souls, the day is at hand when the devil will pull off the paint and garnish that he hath put upon sin, and present that monster sin in such a monstrous shape to your souls that will cause your thoughts to be troubled, your countenance to be changed, the joints of your loins to be loosed, and your knees to be dashed one against another, and your hearts to be so terrified that you will be ready with Ahithophel and Judas to strangle and hang your bodies on earth and your souls in hell, if the Lord hath not more mercy on you than he had on them. Oh, therefore look upon sin now as you must look upon it to all eternity, and as God, conscience, and Satan will present it to you another day. Remedy 4. Seriously to consider that even those very sins that Satan paints and puts new names and colors upon cost the best blood, the noblest blood, the life blood, the heart blood of the Lord Jesus. That Christ should come from the eternal bosom of his Father to a region of sorrow and death, that God should be manifested in the flesh, the Creator made a creature, that he that was clothed with glory should be wrapped with rags of flesh, he that filled heaven and earth with his glory should be cradled in a manger, that the power of God should fly from weak man, the God of Israel into Egypt, that the God of the law should be subject to the law, the God of the circumcision circumcised, the God that made the heavens working at Joseph's homely trade, that he that binds the devils in chains should be tempted, that he whose is the world and the fullness thereof should hunger and thirst, that the God of strength should be weary, the judge of all flesh condemned, the God of life put to death, that he that is one with his Father should cry out of misery, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Matthew 27. That he that had the keys of hell and death at his girdle should lie imprisoned in the sepulchre of another, having in his own lifetime nowhere to lay his head, nor after death to lay his body, that head before which the angels do cast down their crowns should be crowned with thorns, and those eyes purer than the sun, put out by the darkness of death. Those ears which hear nothing but hallelujahs of saints and angels, to hear the blasphemies of the multitude, that face that was fairer than the sons of men to be spit on by those beastly wretched Jews, that mouth and tongue that spake as never man spake, accused for blasphemy, those hands that freely swayed the scepter of heaven, nailed to the cross, those feet like unto fine brass, nailed to the cross for man's sins, each sense annoyed, his feeling or touching with a spear and nails, his smell with stinking flavor, being crucified about Golgotha, the place of skulls, his taste with vinegar and gall, his hearing with reproaches and sight of his mother and disciples bemoaning him, his soul comfortless and forsaken, and all this for those very sins that Satan paints and puts fine colors upon. Oh, how should the consideration of this stir up the soul against it, and work the soul to fly from it, and to use all holy means whereby sin may be subdued and destroyed? After Julius Caesar was murdered, Antonius brought forth his coat, all bloody and cut, and laid it before the people, saying, "Look, here you have the emperor's coat, thus bloody and torn." Whereupon the people were presently in an uproar and cried out to slay those murderers. And they took their tables and stools that were in the place, set them on fire, and ran to the houses of them that had slain Caesar and burnt them. So that when we consider that sin hath slain our Lord Jesus, how should it provoke our hearts to be revenged on sin that hath murdered the Lord of glory, and hath done that mischief that all the devils in hell could never have done? It was good counsel one gave. Never let go out of your minds the thoughts of a crucified Christ. Let these be meat and drink unto you. Let them be your sweetness and consolation, your honey and your desire, your reading and your meditation, your life, death, and resurrection. And I'll stop at the end of that, the completion of device 2, and we will pick it up again. What a powerful book.